Hi everyone. I'm not sure if you can see me up here, but you probably see the slide for the webinar that we have, and I just want to welcome you. My name is Trisha, and I'm the certified aromatherapist and formulator at Beat Cocoa Apothecary. And I have with me today Marie. So she is one of my vendors, CBD vendors, and she is going to tell us a little bit about the endocannabinoid system, how CBD can help support it, and some other good things. So welcome, Marie.
Thank you for having me. It's so nice to see you. And, you know, we've been talking for quite some time and we've thought about doing this. So it's a real pleasure to be able to just, in a very quick time frame, maybe 15 minutes or so, share with your customers now and in the future, just sort of the basics to help them answer some questions about what CBD is, how it can help them, a little bit of history of it, and then maybe give them some guidance on how to pick a product that would be right for them. So that's kind of that's my goal today, and I'm excited to share this information with you, and I also want to make myself available to you in the future for questions. So let's just sort of jump into it. One of the things I think is really important for people to know, I'm just going to talk a little bit about history here. We have been hemp consumers for millennia. One of my favorite questions to ask people is this: what do George Washington and Thomas Jefferson have in common? Everyone knows they were presidents, but not everybody knows they were hemp farmers. They actually paid their taxes back in the early days with hemp. The Mayflower and her sister ships arrived to the United States using hemp rope and hemp sails. You know, our country was really founded on this agricultural this species, which can be cultivated for hundreds of uses, including hemp concrete, fibers, food, tinctures, etc. You could make car parts with it. I mean, the use of it is it's a phenomenal plant, and it's not just in the U.S. history where you know, in our own country, but it goes back use for thousands of years. They have records in what is now called either considered Asia or Kazakhstan or Turkey of hemp extract being used for a variety of reasons, and it might even be the first agricultural crop that we humans developed. So the question is, why did we lose touch with this very valuable product that could provide so much for us, from clothing us to housing us to nourishing our bodies? And it really goes to some of the politics. It comes down to money, politics, and greed. And I would really encourage everybody, I'm not going to go into too much details, but there are some bullet points on the screen. If you want to know why we lost touch with this really important plant, do a quick search on something called the marijuana tax law that was from 1937, and learn a little bit about what was going on in the world and why that happened and really changed our opportunity to cultivate it. You know, it took about 80 to 100 years to where that's changing. Hemp farming is now allowed in the United States again since 2018. The Farm Bill allowed that to happen, and so all of a sudden, all across our country on the shelves, you can see hemp products, hemp seed products, hemp CBD oil. It's a little confusing, and I'm going to try to distill some of those, clear up some of the confusion on all those differences, but just know that this is not a new thing to us. This is something we as humans have used for a very long time. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between hemp and marijuana. And on the screen are some old photos, just from photos from 100 years or so ago. Hemp CBD oil. It's a little confusing. I'm going to try to distill some of those. Okay, I'm hearing some of the information. Clear up some of the confusion on all those differences, but just know. Trisha, I'm hearing reverberation. Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry about that. So on the screen, you see some photos. These are hemp farmers. I think the one on the bottom is from the 1800s. The one on the top is from the early 1900s. And you can see it's a really tall plant. It's more stocky rather than bushy. And if you look at heirloom crop or hemp crops today that are real bona fide industrial hemp, they're tall. They're 10, 12, 14, 15 feet tall. This is much different from a marijuana plant or even domestic hemp right now, with that industry is going through a revolution. Marijuana is a short bushy plant. It's known for its flowers. It's very dense flowering buds, so they really only want the female plants versus the hemp where they want the male and the female plants. And the composition is also a little bit different between the two of them. So even though they're both considered cannabis plants, hemp is known for having low THC. THC is the ingredient in marijuana that is known for the high. It's going to have higher amounts of CBD and the other beneficial compounds in the plant. And marijuana is going to be just subject to a lot of more federal and state laws. So just a lot of, of course, there's a lot of conflict there, but that's changing as states enact more marijuana friendly or ease some of the restrictions. But just know that they're both cannabis plants, but they're different, in terms of their look, their composition, and what we can cultivate from them. I alluded to that European hemp and domestic hemp are actually a little bit different. And let me go into the history about that. Europe never stopped growing hemp. So when hemp was prohibited, the growth of it was prohibited from the 1930s onward, and then marijuana became a scheduled drug in the 1970s. That really didn't have the same, that was not the same situation in Europe versus the United States. So they continued to grow. And that is something that's really important, because what that means is that the European hemp versus the domestic hemp is actually more akin to the heirloom hemp that we co-evolved with it. We've been using this for many thousands of years, and there's still that access to that kind of heirloom or legacy crop, or at least something more akin to it in European sources. And that doesn't mean that the domestic sources aren't any good. I just want people to understand not all hemp is the same. Not all oil hemp products are the same, and the more you can learn about the different sources and the manufacturing and the testing, these are all going to help you be a better CBD consumer. So one of the things to note that in the United States, the limit for the amount of THC that can be in an oil, so that's considered hemp and not marijuana, is 0.3%. That's a really magic number. Everyone has to manufacture it to be 0.3% or less. If the crop that you're growing tests higher than that, then that means processing has to happen. You have to remove the THC. And when you do that, you also change the composition of the oil. That's a really kind of complicated process. And I don't want to get caught up in the weeds too much, no pun intended. I just want to give people an understanding that there is a difference where the oil is sourced, and just sort of the history of all of that. And these slides are going to be made available, so if people want to read them in more detail, Trisha's going to have those. Okay, so let's get to like the stuff you've all been waiting for. What is CBD? CBD is one of 500 or so compounds in the hemp, cannabis, marijuana plants. It stands for cannabidiol, and it's one of about 140 cannabinoids that are found in the hemp plant. When I said 500 compounds, I mean there's a lot of good stuff in a cannabis extract or a hemp extract. Vitamins, minerals, fatty acids, amino acids, terpenes, terpenoids, flavonoids. There are all these actually it's nutritious. It's very nutritiously dense. But we're just going to focus on CBD and the idea of the cannabinoids. So on the screen, you're going to see a picture of THC on the left and CBD on the right. Notice if you got a little bit of background in biochemistry, you can see those are really similar. You don't even need a background in biochemistry to get that those compounds there's a slight variation in them, but by and large, they almost look identical. But that does not mean they act identical in your body. They actually act quite differently. We're going to talk a little bit about where they interact, and that's the endocannabinoid system. But I'm going to step aside for a second. I'm going to give you an example. Back in my grad school days, I had a professor who said, what's the difference between cholesterol and estrogen and testosterone? And we were all like, well, those are really different. Cholesterol interacts with, makes your blood vessels all clogged up, and estrogen makes you, feminizes a person, and testosterone makes somebody more masculine. But then he showed us the chemical structures, and they're really, really similar. So it's an analogy for you to think of, which is this: slight chemical changes in something we ingest can have big differences on how it acts in our body. And that's really important to know with CBD versus THC. I also want to just let everyone know CBD is not the only cool player in this game. There are loads of other compounds in the cannabinoid profile that are being researched right now. So you might hear about things like CBG, CBC, CBN, CBDA, CBDV, etc. They're all being looked at to see how they can help. Now, there's another thing I want everyone to get from this. You already make your own cannabinoids. It is part of your body function. In fact, I think it goes back in the 1990s where they first identified a neurotransmitter called anandamide. And it is very similar to THC. And so we naturally produce it. It's called anandamide, which is a reference to this Sanskrit word for bliss, and that's appropriately named. It's called the bliss hormone sometimes, but this is a compound that your body produces and uses. And what's so cool is that we can also ingest these compounds by extracting them from certain plants, primarily the cannabis plants, and in this case, we're talking mostly about hemp. So what the takeaway here is CBD is a naturally occurring product. Your body makes it. You can consume it elsewhere, and it does really good things. It can help, can do really good things in that it is believed that these cannabinoids interact with a part of your body that regulates homeostasis. And we're going to talk about that next. Oh, we're not going to talk about that next. Yes, we are. I'm going to go back to that slide in a moment. So what is the endocannabinoid system? That is what I was referring to. The endocannabinoid system is where the CBD and these other compounds interact in your body. It refers to receptors that are located throughout your body from head to toe, internally and externally. And it is the largest auto-regulatory system in your body. It regulates or is involved in regulating just about everything from sleep to mood to how you experience pain, metabolism, and energy, you know, how is the cell responding? There's even thought that it might be part of the mechanism that tells cells to adjust themselves, to turn themselves on or turn themselves off if they need to be, if they've kind of hit their shelf life, if you will. And so all of these functions are under the umbrella of what's referred to as homeostasis, or balance in the body. So let me kind of connect the dots here, because I know I've gotten into a little bit of this science. It can get a little weedy for people. CBD is a compound. Your body makes similar compounds like the neurotransmitter anandamide. These compounds interact with these receptors in your body, which are part of the endocannabinoid system. And the endocannabinoid system is involved in a very important way with balancing vital functions necessary for health, wellness, and survival. And that overall regulation is referred to as homeostasis. So I hope people are starting to connect the dots here. This is important stuff. And I think you're like, now I get why people are so interested in CBD. Now I understand why they want to take supplements, or they want to use it and see if it can help them in a variety of different ways. So I'm going to go to the next slide, and then we'll go back to that one in a moment. I apologize. Got my slides a little bit out of order. Let's talk about where these receptors are a little bit more detailed and understand that there are different kinds of receptors. We're going to talk about two main kinds of receptors in your body. And on the bottom on the screen is a picture, a schematic of what a receptor is. And if you don't have a background in science, let me just kind of give you an idea of what I mean by a receptor. Receptors are landing pads. They're on every cell of your body, and it's how the chemicals that your body uses to pass signals to is how they interact with the cells. It's like a lock and key situation. So if I have adrenaline receptor on my heart and I see a bear chasing me, my body's going to secrete adrenaline. It's going to land on that receptor, and that receptor is going to tell the heart, pump blood, pump faster. She needs to run because there's a bear chasing her. So that is sort of in overall how they function. So these receptors are located everywhere. We have receptors for our hormones like estrogen and testosterone and growth hormone and pituitary hormone and adrenaline and all these different compounds, as well as receptors for the cannabinoids. And you can see that they're located in kind of two sort of separate areas. There are two types of receptors, and they respond to the different cannabinoids differently. CB1 receptors are more in the brain, CB2 are more in the body. Not such a surprise. THC, which is the part of cannabis that makes us high, interacts more with the receptors. It fits better, if you will, with the receptors in the brain. And CBD fits better with the receptors in your body. So sometimes people refer to as THC being psychoactive because it gives you a high, and CBD being more of a health promoting compound. And if you look at that list on the screen, you'll see that it's not 100% black or white. They really, there is some overlap, because you'll see CB1 receptors throughout the body. They concentrate in the brain, they are throughout the body. And while the CB2 receptors are concentrated in the body, they're also in the brain. Remember, largest autoregulatory system in the body. These receptors are on every cell, and that means every cell is going to have some, or has the potential to have a response to the cannabinoids. So if you're consuming CBD and the cannabinoids from a plant-based source, you're then, in theory, giving the endocannabinoid system some of what it needs to function more effectively. Okay, I want to go back to, bear with me, I'm going to go to CBD versus hemp oil. I appreciate everyone's patience. So this is a huge confusion for people. What's the difference between CBD and hemp oil? Now, hemp oil is referred to oil that comes from the hemp plant. It can be extracted from any part of the plant. Primarily in our stores, when you're buying hemp oil, you're actually getting hemp seed oil. That is because there are no psychoactive compounds in the seeds. So you can go to the store and you get hemp seed oil, hemp seeds, hemp seed powder, and that's really, when you hear hemp oil, that's really what that's referring to, primarily the seeds. CBD oil is a much thicker oil. It almost looks like molasses. It's really dark when it's first extracted. It's a viscous oil. It comes from the stalks, and you can also get it from the flowers, but when it comes from hemp, it's really thick, and it smells really earthy and pungent. My daughter says to her it smells like burnt green tea, and it's super, that's the one we're talking about, that's really nutritious, because while it has the omegas and such like that, but it's where you also get the cannabinoids, CBD, CBC, CBN, and the 140 plus other compounds. So if you see hemp oil on the label, or you see hemp oil on the shelf in your grocery store, that is not CBD. If you need to really look at the label and make sure it says CBD in there and it tells you exactly how much is in there, because those are not the same thing. It gets very confusing, especially if you're shopping online and some of the more popular e-commerce platforms. There's a lot of labels that say hemp oil, and sometimes people confuse the two. So this is an area where, if you're having additional questions, I really encourage you to talk to Trisha. She'll give you some good information to explain the difference as well. Okay, so we talked about the endocannabinoid system. Let's talk about how the plant-based cannabinoids can help you. I think I've alluded to this, but we're going to just give this a real overview. Your body makes these compounds naturally. They're referred to as endogenous cannabinoids, but you can become deficient. And how is that so? There's an analogy I can give you, and that is the analogy of vitamin D. Our bodies make vitamin D. When you go out in the sun, a chemical reaction takes place, and your body produces the vitamin D that's beneficial to help your immune system and other parts of your body for functioning. What if you live in an area where there's very little sun? What if you spend all day indoors, you never get outside? If your exposure to sun is limited for whatever reason, you can become deficient in vitamin D. But fortunately, we can ingest it from our diet. So when our body doesn't get enough sun, it can't make the vitamin D we need, we can consume it. That analogy applies here with the cannabinoids. Sometimes we're deficient. The reasons for our deficiency are kind of complex. Some people theorize that our bodies don't make enough because we co-evolved with the cannabis plants over 5, 10, 15,000 years, and so we kind of become dependent on the plant. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm just sharing with you. There's people trying to figure that out. But the beautiful thing is that we have a source. And it's legal now in the United States to grow hemp, and that hemp has an abundance amount of these phytocannabinoids or plant-based cannabinoids, phyto is Latin for plant, that you can then ingest. And I really encourage you to try to find a source that's heirloom and organic. The reason I say organic, obviously, everyone knows that we want organic practices, avoid the chemicals that are food chain as much as we can. It's better for you. And then heirloom means that that plant has a very stable plant genetics, and it's also got a complexity that's going to provide all the nuanced ingredients that you need, avoiding as much processing as possible, keeping it back to close to nature, back to nature, if you will. I also want to share something that's really quite unique about the cannabinoids that come from cannabis plants. They are so similar in structure to what we naturally make ourselves that it's very easy for our body to turn them into something that's bioactive. Our body doesn't have to go through a lot of, adjusting of the oil to make it work for you. CBD or the other cannabinoids, when you're ingested, it's almost like your body goes, oh yeah, I know what you are, and I know exactly how I need to use you, and that's done. So it's very useful right away for your body. The metabolism, the pharmacokinetics of this are really quite interesting. I'll say that for a more scientific chat if we ever do another one of these webinars. But just know this plant is doing a really good thing for us because it's making the product that's easy for us to digest and use with very little effort on our body's part. Okay, then the question is, how do you choose wisely? And I'm going to just pause right here because the number one question people always want to ask is, what can I take for XYZ condition? And the reality is that anybody who is doing this ethically can't answer that because there's no indication for using it for X, Y, or Z condition. So making claims about the product, about how it might treat or cure preventive disease is a huge no-no. What somebody who understands that and is really ethical in their practices, and Tricia will demonstrate that for you, is we can talk to you about how to choose it based on a couple of key features: potency, taste, and price. Potency really refers to how much do you want to take a day. Some people take a couple milligrams a day, some people take a couple 100 milligrams a day. There's no one right answer at this point. It's kind of like drinking water. Some days you need more water than others, and you develop an intuitiveness about how much to drink. CBD is kind of the same way, or CBD oil is the same way. So kind of depending on where you're at in your assessment of your wellness might determine how much that you want to take. Maybe you need a little bit less, maybe you need a little bit more. So always go for as much potency though as you can afford. You don't want to shortchange yourself on here. And good news is, because it is a fat or oil soluble product, if you consume it in an oil form, what your body doesn't need, your body will store for you in your adipose tissue. So another little bit more science on the side, but go for as much potency as you can afford, so that you're just really giving your body as much as it needs. It's like if you ran a marathon and you only drank a cup of water, you would still be dehydrated. You need more hydration and more water. So you probably want to give yourself, drink a couple liters over the course of a few hours to rehydrate yourself. So potency is a really important thing when choosing your CBD options. The other thing is taste. In its natural form, it doesn't taste very good. It tastes kind of stinky and smelly. But I encourage people to get over that if you can, because you want to avoid processing. At least that's my personal opinion. It's got a very earthy, green flavor. And if that is too much for you, then there's some options where there's some people can distill it or process it and remove some of the stuff that makes it taste that way. One of the things that makes CBD oil from hemp taste that way is the chlorophyll. There's a lot of chlorophyll in it. That's why it's so dark. You can get a filtered product where they've removed that. The taste will be more mild. And you can get a tincture that's got all sorts of flavors to it, and it's going to be very clear. Just know that is not how it comes naturally. The clearer it is and the better tasting it is, absolutely the most processed it is. So my encouragement to you is, it's kind of like orange juice. If you're thirsty for orange juice, you could buy some organic oranges and squeeze them yourself. You could go get organic squeezed juice in the store. You could get regular orange juice. You could get Kool-Aid. You could get orange soda. They're not the same. So think of CBD as the same thing. The closer to nature you can tolerate it in terms of taste, might be best for you. Just, but there are options. Just work with Trisha in terms of what might be the best for you. Then finally, price. It's really, you get what you pay for. Kind of like the auto market, you can get a Mercedes-Benz, you can get a Yugo, you can get a new car, you can get a used car. So with regards to price, typically there's a connection between the quality and the concentration of the CBD and the price. So if somebody's telling you that they're selling you 10,000 milligrams of CBD for $9.99 and the bottle is clear, I'd be very concerned. I'd be questioning that. Some of the things I'd ask would be, like ask to see the lab work, for example, because any reputable company will have the lab work for you. Look at the label and see if it says CBD, or if it just says hemp oil. But just really recognize that price can indicate quality. Higher quality products are going to cost a little bit more, very much like the auto industry, or or good furniture, for example. Prefab made from wood particle pieces that are glued together versus something that somebody carved by hand. Not the same thing. And then, okay, so let's go next. There's the potency, taste, and price, and then there's also how do you want to consume it? And there's loads of ways to do that. So they're ingestible products. You can get the pure concentrate. Not everybody sells that, but there's a few good companies out there that do. Or you can have it blended with a carrier oil like MCT oil or olive oil to make a tincture or liquid. There are capsules and gel caps, easier to take because they taste better. It changes the digestion a little. How it's absorbed, not digested, how it's absorbed can depend on your digestion. There are edibles. One of the more popular things right now, everyone's CBD gummies, but just keep in mind the CBD gummy is way different from that CBD product that came from that natural hemp plant. You can use it topically, and sometimes people ask, why would I want to use it on my skin? It goes back to those receptors we talked about a little while ago. Those receptors are everywhere, including your skin. So your skin can benefit from it as well. There's body products, face products, hair care. Topical products are the ones that a lot of times people start with first, too. They want an ointment, they want a salve, they want to see how that feels on their skin. They're a little bit concerned about taking it internally. There's also vape products, the products for pets. And then there's a lot of novelty right now in the industry, products for like patches, or in various kinds of food products, for intimacy products for women. So, right now it's sort of an explosion of product. Fancy packaging, though, is not going to necessarily mean what's inside is best. I'm always going to encourage you to go for the least processed, best you can afford. And how you pick that is going to depend on those key features, that key things that we just discussed, which is what does your pocketbook afford, how much potency do you need, and where are you on the taste profile, how much can you tolerate it, and keeping that in mind. So this kind of wraps it up for me. And I just want to open up to any questions that anybody might have.
Well, I think you did an awesome job addressing a lot of questions, because I know for me personally, people ask about it for specific issues. They'll say, can I use it for sleep or for anxiety or things like that? And we know that we can't make medical claims about this product, but how do you answer when you get a question like that for a specific?
All the time. I get this question all the time. I don't want to talk about specific products from my company, but I'll tell you in general, I'll answer that two ways. We've begun to address that by mixing our CBD with other ingredients that people can connect appropriate help with. So for example, you might mix it with melatonin or chamomile or some other, passion flower or some other ingredients that can be calming. And then you might be, because of the, the melatonin in there, you can then label it in a way that says, you know, this might be beneficial for rest, for example. And so that the consumer goes, oh, but the indication or that description doesn't have to do with the CBD per se. It has to do with the other ingredients, because you don't want to ever, you want to be really careful. If somebody's making medical claims, that's like just a huge no-no in this industry. But if they don't necessarily want to look at a product with a label on it that has these other ingredients that help describe where it's beneficial, then I usually start people off with as close to nature as they can. So I'll say this. Let's just start you with a raw product, maybe a liquid or a tincture. Give them instructions how to take it. When it doesn't taste so good, one of the things I tell them you can do is, you know, leave it under your tongue, or have a glass of orange juice or lemonade or tea to follow it up with. And then just experiment with that. So let's say you start with a raw product and you use that for 2 to 4 weeks and play with how much you take. Maybe it's a couple teaspoons a day, maybe it's half a teaspoon a day. There's no right or wrong. If you tolerate it, you're starting to feel better with whatever was going on, then you've hit a winner. If right off the bat you're like, yeah, I don't think burnt lawnmower flavors is on my radar, then start with something that is gone through a little bit of processing. Just that's really how simple it is. Because of the diffuse nature of the endocannabinoid system, because of its involvement in managing and maintaining and regulating and upregulating and downregulating homeostasis and its interaction with the immune system, any little bit is going to be beneficial. So rather than sometimes that question is, to me, it's like when someone's saying, well, I'm really thirsty, how much water should I take? Or I'm really thirsty, what should I drink? Drink some water. How much? Till you feel better, you know? So I understand the motivation for that question. We've trained people to look for the information on the packet rather than to trust our intuition. This kind of asks us to go back and turn inward and say, let me start here, gauge how I feel, and then experiment until I've found the right combination of price and taste and potency that makes me feel better. I don't know if that might not have answered. Someone wanted to say, give me this, but I just can't go there.
No, I think it just helps us to understand just kind of how CBD can fit into the whole picture of wellness. So
Yep.
Just thank you so much for joining us today. And I guess we can go ahead and wrap it up, because we've been on about half an hour. So we can wrap it up. And thank you for those that joined us. And have a great day, Bikakoa family. And I will see you all next week. I'm not sure what I'm going to hop on and do next week, but if you do have questions about CBD, feel free to reach out to me in the comment section. Now that the salon is open, at least the retail part is open, you can come in and ask questions, text me or whatever. So yeah, we're here to help, and I'm glad that Marie could just give us an overview about CBD, and that was awesome. So thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. It was good to see you, and everybody have a wonderful weekend.
Awesome. Bye, guys.